MrDragonSlayer here again with a special episode. This one we're going to talk about dinosaurs. Just how long have dinosaurs been in the earth? Inquiring minds want to know. When was the first dinosaur discovered? That's what this article comes from. Scholastic. That's what they teach kids. Learn how scientists uncovered the first dinosaur bones in the 1800s, and now excitement grew in the 1900s as more fossils were unearthed. You know, I just sit there and I wonder what people think. Just because you find something doesn't mean that it was terrestrial in origin. Or was it brought to the earth from somewhere else? I mean, like, does someone ever ask, like, they have all this stuff from prior civilizations, yet you don't see dinosaur bones as being one of them? You don't see in the antiquities bones from dinosaurs? At least I don't. They have books, they have all kinds of stuff, thousands of years old. But isn't it odd? Doesn't anyone think it's odd as the earth compiles dirt upon dirt, layer after layer, throughout the years, that wouldn't it make the dinosaurs closer to the top of the surface thousands of years ago? Don't you think that they would say, oh, look at these giant reptiles that we found, this monstrous head? Yet we see in Asian and European civilizations, we see dragons. We see dragons and dragon lore and dragon gods. But we don't see thousands of years old discoveries of dinosaurs. Why? Why not? Ask yourself. Okay, let's get on to this. Way back in 1676, Robert Plot, the curator of an English museum, described and drew a thigh bone that he believed belonged to a giant man, although that fossil disappeared without a trace. The surviving illustration suggests that it may have well been part of a megalosaurus. Later in 1822, large teeth discovered in England by Mary Ann Mantle and her husband Gideon were thought to be the remains of a huge and extinct iguana. It wasn't until 1841 that the British scientist Richard Owen came to realize that such fossils were distinct from teeth or bones or of any living creature. The ancient animals were so different. In fact, they deserved their own name, so Owen dubbed the group Dinosauria, which means terrible lizards. Now just imagine, how come these discoveries weren't 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago? I mean, there was a lot of digging done in the Middle East. How come? You gotta ask yourself. Across the ocean in North America, dinosaur tracks were studied in the Connecticut Valley, beginning in the 1830s. They were believed to belong to enormous ravens, freed from Noah's Ark after the Great Flood. Wow, what a theory! That takes a lot of faith right there. That they flew all the way around the world, halfway around the world, to have their giant raven feet in the Connecticut Valley. I mean, if we think about it logically, where was Noah's flood? What was the world according to Noah? It was according to the area around there. It wasn't like he was jet setting, taking off and flying to Europe and South America, North America, Europe. No, it wasn't like that. That he was stuck in his own region. So the region in which he lived was his whole world. So if that world that he knew flooded, I mean, it was to him the whole earth. I mean, look how long they thought the earth was flat. Are you kidding me? Are we going to dumb ourselves down so much that we're going to take true science, observable, repeatable, testable, and just go back to the old ways where it's just our beliefs? We believe it this way. And I get it that they didn't have knowledge. They didn't have knowledge, so how could they know? Does that mean that we believe like them? No, it doesn't mean that we believe like them. That we have things like DuckDuckGo, search engines, that we can search things that, like if God were sought, he should be found. Like if you seek, you find. If you ask, you receive. If you knock, it is opened unto you. Those principles we're supposed to operate by. That this isn't a long time ago that we're talking about. We're talking about in the 1800s. Okay, well, what about the previous, let's say, 5,000 years? What about that? How come there's not giant fossils put together that Nebuchadnezzar had put together, erected, or Nimrod, or, and the list goes on and on. How come Plato doesn't talk about it? Socrates. We got to ask questions. If we ask questions and we seek their answers, we're bound to find them. But if we are just closed-minded and not open-minded, that, man, we're going to have a hard time figuring things out, that we're going to go by what somebody else told us. And I hate to say it, but you're going to end up with whoever you believe and you follow, you'll end up where they're at. So, do we really want to go by old facts, old truths? Or do we want to step up to the plate and hit a home run and operate in the here and now with the technology and the information that is available to us? That somebody like Elijah, he didn't get to go flying. He didn't get to go riding a jet. He didn't get to go take a car ride. He didn't get to go bicycling. Not in this dimension. He didn't get to do any of that until it was time for him to leave. Or chariots of fire came for him. I mean, look at what we have available to us. That we can see far into the universe. That we have testimonials that we can go and look into. We have the Bible. They had the Bible chained up in churches in Europe. That wasn't available. That people couldn't read it. They're illiterate. Now we have the grace now to we can just take a search engine and figure out what it says, or go get a bound book, Bible. One of my favorites is the Thompson's chain reference. Chain reference, yeah, you can build some chains with it, huh? Got a little secret there, huh? Thompson's chain reference, good Bible. King James Version. It's my favorite. So let's get back to this. At that time, paleontology was long on deduction and short on evidence. This was remediated when two wealthy and competitive American scientists, Othniel Marsh and Edward Cope, raced to excavate fossils in the Rocky Mountain region in the late 1800s. Their separate teams, armed against Native Americans and each other, dug up tons and tons of bones from several sites. All in all, Marsh and Cope's rivalry, known as the Bone Wars, uncovered 136 new species, and their respective fossil displays generated excitement for dinosaurs the world over. So let's try to take a look. It says two wealthy and competitive American scientists. You know, they had to have some money to fund this stuff. But it says wealthy. They must have been extremely, in my mind, to take on such an endeavor. But is there more to it? Is there more to it than meets the eye? You know, I tend to think so. I do. I really do. Like, you could ask yourself, how come American Indians didn't have skulls and didn't have, say, talons and such from such enormous fossils? I mean, weren't they there too? You know, I'd like to know. More so, even, like, how did these wealthy scientists know where to dig? These are all good questions that you'll come up with the answer if you ask enough questions. Let's skip down a little bit. In the 1900s, enthusiasm for dinosaurs grew steadily, attracting the attention of the scientific community. Institutions such as the Carnegie Museum of Natural History and the American Museum of Natural History assembled dig teams which uncovered many rich bone beds in North America as their counterparts overseas. New sites in Utah revealed several different species, including the Camarasaurus and the Apatosaurus and the Stegosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Remains were found in Montana and baby Colossosaurs in New Mexico. You know, we gotta understand too a couple different things if we're biblically literate. Now, we know that there's ties that bind. That bind what? Well, that hold us together, the ties that bind. That they hold us together. With great enthusiasm, we can say that, well, we know that the enemy was to be locked up for 1,000 years. That he was bound, the ties that bound him, that kept him away. Now, we ask ourselves, well, when did that start? Did that start immediately after Christ was crucified and resurrected? Or was it at a later point that some of these evil entities were loosed? Well, we know the strength of sin is the law. So we know that Jesus said that my gospel's got to be preached around this world. So it's got to be carried forth. Now, let's not underestimate the powers and the gates of hell to be loosed in the earth and what kind of entities come from them. We're talking about extraterrestrials. We're talking about fallen angels. But are they the only things that are out there? Are angels, was that all of God's creation? No, of course not. You'd be a moron to think that the universe is so great, and more so that God is so great that and the difference in species. Just look at the difference between the whale and, say, the giraffe or the African rhino and say the mule deer. You know, to the common rodent, to the toucan, to the eagle, to the vulture. I mean, we're talking pretty impressive that, boy, God, when he creates, boy, does he ever. But are we saying that he didn't create before, that God is eternal? that he's always been and always will be. That can't we conceive that God, yeah, he's made plenty of other creatures that inhabit other parts of the universe. Some good and some not so good. Can't we open up our eyes to see a little bit more now that the veil has been removed? That can't we come in and say, Father, how does this work? And in belief, know that we will receive what we ask for if we diligently seek it out. You know, that doesn't mean that God's going to do all the heavy lifting for you. No, you've got to do the heavy lifting. He's going to go ahead and make sure it's there when you're ready for it. Everything in order with God. That He is good, orderly direction, some people say. That we need to move towards it, though. So, we know with the great evil that's been loosed in the earth recently, just say within the last 5 years, the great monumental accounts and videos and testimonies of people that have seen interdimensional spacecraft, otherwise known as UFOs. You know, can't we maybe put something together that, hey, that they pilot these interdimensional spacecrafts? Hey, that they could have cargo holds, and they could even put stuff like that in there. The bones from other planets, so to speak, other parts of the universe. And yeah, as evil's loosed and people become more dumbed down and their IQs become incredibly smaller, and they fall for the devil and his parlor tricks and his false signs and wonders. Isn't it appropriate that they could, with the advent of secret societies, go and plant these all throughout the earth? I mean, ask yourself, why wasn't this stuff discovered before then? You've got to wonder, you've got to ask yourself. I know I do. And I'm not falling for, it's billions and billions and billions of years old. Well, yeah, if you have certain measuring systems to measure things, like age, that it's going to show up. Yeah, how old's that rock? Oh, this piece of granite, well, it's 33 to 120 million years old. That's true. You know, maybe there's technology that you don't have, though, that would say it's only 6,000 years old, 6,600 years old. Well, how could that be? Well, you got to wonder that if God makes a piece of granite, He's got to go by what? By the laws that govern this dimension. That when you get combinations of elements, it's going to show a certain age. Surely. So it doesn't matter if God made it 5 minutes ago. It's still going to say, say 60 million years ago that it was made. Why? Because of the composition of the materials. That's why, in the way that God has it set up. That He has it set up a certain way. Right? That if you've got a piece of granite, it's going to show that kind of age. It's going to have a half-life, so on and so forth. Let's not get into the details too much, but let's talk about what could be known and what should be known. Now that goes against all kind of teachers. And you know what? So did Galileo. He went against all kind of teachers too. But he wasn't going to believe that the earth was the center of the universe. What kind of nonsense is that? Well, we can see through technology and through teachings that that's a load of BS, so to speak. Oh, that we're just small, the Milky Way, just a little tiny thing. You know, when you start thinking about it, and people, I hear these fools telling me, oh yeah, it was when Mars and Earth slammed into each other that the moons came forth. That you really believe that? I mean, come on, that's where the moons came from? Was from two giant planets slamming into each other? I mean, if you're going to go by their kind of science, of course, yeah, you got to come up with something. You know, how did water come to the Earth? Oh, it came by asteroids and meteors and comets. I mean, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? I mean, oh, come on now. It tells you where it came from. It came from God. That he's not a man. That maybe he had plans and just spoke it forth, and it went according to his plans that maybe he worked on for, I don't know, what would we consider a few years to get everything set up just right, just so. You know, we have these giant voids, like the Botez void, super void. You know, there's nothing in there. It's void and formless, and it's, you know, 150 million light years across. It's void and formless. Let's get this straight. You know, do we pretend that God in the universe doesn't have undeveloped space? Are we that foolish that we just say, hey, God, I'm going to put you in this here box, and we're just going to go, and we're going to keep you in this box about what we say you can do. Man, that's called pride. It's getting up into my face. It makes me annoyed greatly when I hear kind of nonsense like that. People putting God in a box. I don't like it. You know, it said that Michael said, "Who's unto God?" People ought to ask themselves that. Who's unto God? How do you even manage your life? You know, you're telling God what he can do? When you got evidence of interdimensional spacecraft and accounts of God bringing his throne to Earth, and people trying to describe stuff like you could call fire down from the heavens. Well, have you ever seen missiles, man? Giant fiery missiles? Oh, no, it's lightning. Oh, yeah, I'm going to go back to the days of Zeus and Jupiter and all that. The enemy would like that. They'd like you to say, oh, I don't believe in the science, but oh, I believe in this science, especially the science that calls God a liar. You know, and you wonder why I'm asking, like, who are you agreeing with? Who are you agreeing with? I sit and I wonder. It's like, you believe these scientists, but look what these scientists are saying. Couldn't you go? The veil has ripped. Can't you go into the presence of God? Can't you bring a song? You write your own song and sing it from your heart. Can't you come into his presence and just say, God, how is this? How does this work? You know, I have great resilience to resist fools. You know, and I do. That's why I don't like to read a lot of foolish stuff or even venture into talking with this stuff, because it's definitely going to cut like a sword. Yeah, it's not going to cut me. It's going to cut off the fat, cut off the foolishness. Come in.